Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. A sky full of dreams. The low hum of the aircraft's engines thrummed softly, a sound that for many passengers blended seamlessly with their thoughts. For Clara Lawson, however, it was a melody she had grown to cherish over the years. Seated by the window, her eyes traced the intricate patterns of the clouds below, a serene escape from the often chaotic and judgmental world. She loved flying, not just as a means of travel, but for the peace it brought her. Up here, she could dream without limitations. Clara wasn't new to this route. As a consultant for a global nonprofit focused on education equity, she spent much of her time on airplanes, traveling to remote towns and bustling cities alike. Her purpose was to build bridges between systems, communities, and most importantly, people. She believed in her mission, often saying, "The sky isn't the limit, it's where our work begins." Today, her destination was Miami, where she was scheduled to give a keynote speech at an international summit on educational reform. It was a prestigious event, and Clara had prepared meticulously for it. She was known for her eloquence and ability to inspire change, and her story, one of resilience, perseverance, and triumph over systemic barriers, often left audiences in awe. Dressed in a soft gray knit sweater and tailored slacks, Clara's appearance was understated yet polished. Her skin, the color of rich mahogany, glowed softly in the sunlight streaming through the window. Despite her accomplishments, Clara had grown accustomed to the assumptions people made about her based solely on her appearance. She had learned to meet such moments with grace, though they often left her weary. As the plane began boarding earlier, Clara had observed the usual hustle and bustle of passengers filing in, some with weary smiles and others with harried expressions. She offered a polite nod to the flight attendants stationed near the entrance, but the gesture went unacknowledged. A minor slight, she told herself. She found her seat, stowed her bag, and settled in. Now, mid-flight, the mood in the cabin was calm. Passengers were engrossed in their books, screens, or quiet conversations. Clara, too, was lost in her thoughts, preparing mentally for the impactful message she hoped to deliver at the summit. But her focus was soon interrupted. A flight attendant approached the aisle with the beverage cart, distributing drinks with mechanical efficiency. Clara noticed how warmly the attendant interacted with the other passengers, exchanging pleasantries and smiles. Yet, when the cart reached her row, the attendant's demeanor shifted. "What can I get you?" the attendant asked, her tone clipped and devoid of the friendliness she had shown moments before. "Just water, please," Clara replied politely, offering a smile. The attendant handed her the water without meeting her gaze and moved on, her perfunctory manner leaving a sour note in the air. Clara tried to dismiss it, attributing it to fatigue or the pressures of the job. But as the flight progressed, the same pattern repeated. The attendant was noticeably cold and distant whenever she interacted with Clara, contrasting sharply with her warmth toward other passengers. Clara wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but she couldn't ignore the growing unease in her chest. She considered speaking up, but decided against it, wary of drawing unnecessary attention to herself. Her years of navigating spaces where she often felt unseen had taught her to pick her battles carefully. The turning point came when the plane encountered mild turbulence, causing the seatbelt sign to illuminate. As passengers dutifully fastened their belts, Clara noticed an elderly woman seated across the aisle, struggling with hers. The woman's frail hands fumbled with the buckle, her frustration evident. Without hesitation, Clara unbuckled her own seatbelt and leaned over to assist the woman. Her actions were swift and efficient, earning a grateful smile from the elderly passenger. But no sooner had Clara settled back into her seat than the flight attendant appeared, her expression stern. "Ma'am, you're not supposed to unbuckle your seatbelt when the sign is on," the attendant said sharply, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of nearby passengers. Clara looked up, startled. "I was just helping her," she explained, gesturing toward the elderly woman, who nodded in agreement. "It doesn't matter," the attendant snapped. "Rules are rules." Clara felt the weight of several pairs of eyes on her, their gazes heavy with judgment. She swallowed hard, willing herself to stay composed. "I understand, and I apologize," she said calmly. "I didn't mean to break the rules, but she needed help." The attendant huffed and walked away, leaving Clara feeling humiliated and unjustly chastised. She turned her gaze back to the window, the once comforting view of the clouds now offering little solace. But the incident didn't end there. A few minutes later, the flight attendant returned, accompanied by a senior crew member. Their expressions were a mix of sternness and unease. "Ms. Lawson," the senior crew member began, addressing her by name after checking the passenger manifest. "We've been informed of your repeated disregard for flight protocols. We'll have to report this incident to the airline." Clara blinked, stunned. "Repeated disregard? I only unbuckled my seatbelt once, and it was to assist a passenger who needed help. Nonetheless, it's our duty to ensure compliance with safety regulations," the senior crew member replied, her tone firm but measured. "We'll be filing a report." Clara opened her mouth to protest but stopped herself. The futility of arguing against a narrative already being constructed around her was all too familiar. She nodded silently, her heart sinking. As the announcement for the plane's descent into Miami crackled through the speakers, Clara couldn't shake the sense of injustice that had unfolded. Little did she know, the ripples of this moment were only beginning to spread, setting the stage for a confrontation that would challenge the boundaries of respect, equality, and accountability at 30,000 feet. As the plane began its descent into Miami, Clara sat in her seat, staring blankly at the clouds. The humiliation from the confrontation with the flight crew lingered like a dull ache. She replayed the events in her mind, wondering if she had done something wrong or if she was simply another victim of a subtle, unspoken prejudice that seemed to shadow her life. The elderly woman she had helped caught her eye and gave her a small, reassuring smile. Clara returned the gesture, grateful for the brief moment of kindness, though it did little to lighten the weight in her chest. The plane landed smoothly, and as passengers disembarked, Clara stayed seated, waiting until the aisle cleared. She wanted to avoid more unnecessary attention. When it was finally her turn, she gathered her belongings and stepped into the jet bridge. She felt the weight of the flight attendants' eyes on her as she exited, their expressions unreadable. Stepping into the terminal, Clara took a deep breath. The bustling energy of the airport was a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere she had left behind on the plane. She pulled out her phone, glanced at the time, and confirmed she had just enough time to get to her hotel, freshen up, and head to the summit. Her speech was scheduled for the afternoon, and she needed to put the unpleasant experience behind her. As Clara made her way through the terminal, she noticed a man in a sharp suit standing near the arrival gate. He was holding a sign with her name written in bold letters. Surprised, Clara approached him cautiously. "Ms. Lawson?" the man asked, lowering the sign and extending a hand. His expression was professional, but warm. "Yes, that's me," Clara replied, shaking his hand. "I'm James Whitaker, from the Summit Organizing Committee. We heard about your arrival and wanted to ensure you got to the venue comfortably. I'll be your driver for today," he said, gesturing toward the exit. Clara was taken aback by the gesture. "That's very kind of you." "Thank you." As they walked through the airport, James engaged her in polite conversation, asking about her work and expressing admiration for her dedication to education reform. His genuine interest in her story was a welcome change from the tension she had endured earlier. By the time they reached the sleek black car waiting outside, Clara felt her spirits lifting slightly. The drive to the hotel was smooth, and Clara took the opportunity to mentally rehearse her speech. She had poured her heart into it, weaving in personal anecdotes, data-driven insights, and a call to action that she hoped would inspire change. This was her chance to make a difference, and she wasn't about to let a single unpleasant incident derail her focus. At the hotel, Clara checked in and headed to her room, where she spent the next hour preparing for the summit. She chose a tailored navy blue dress that exuded professionalism and confidence, paired with simple silver jewelry. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she reminded herself of her purpose: to advocate for those who didn't have a voice and to challenge systems that perpetuated inequality. Arriving at the summit venue, Clara was greeted warmly by the organizers. The grand ballroom was filled with people from all over the world, educators, policymakers, activists, and thought leaders. The energy in the room was palpable, a testament to the collective passion for creating a better future. As Clara mingled with the attendees, she couldn't help but notice a few familiar faces from the flight. They seemed surprised to see her in this context, their earlier assumptions about her likely shattered by her confident demeanor and the respect she commanded in this space. Clara held her head high, determined not to let their initial judgment affect her. When it was time for her keynote speech, Clara took the stage to a round of applause. She stood at the podium, scanning the crowd, and began to speak. Her words flowed effortlessly, capturing the audience's attention with their authenticity and power. She shared stories of children in underserved communities who had defied the odds, the systemic barriers that needed dismantling, and the transformative potential of education. As she spoke, Clara felt the weight of her earlier experiences melting away. This was her domain, a space where her voice mattered, where she could inspire action and foster change. The standing ovation at the end of her speech was a testament to the impact of her message, and Clara felt a renewed sense of purpose. After the speech, Clara was approached by several attendees who wanted to express their admiration and discuss potential collaborations. Among them was a tall man with salt-and-pepper hair and a commanding presence. He introduced himself as Richard Belmont, the CEO of the airline she had flown with earlier that day. "Ms. Lawson, your speech was nothing short of extraordinary," he began, his tone sincere. "I'm Richard Belmont, CEO of Horizon Air. I'd like to discuss something important with you if you have a moment." Clara was caught off guard, but nodded. "Of course, Mr. Belmont." They found a quiet corner, and Belmont wasted no time addressing the issue. "I understand there was an incident on one of our flights this morning involving you and our crew. I've received a report from my team, but I wanted to hear your perspective directly." Clara hesitated, unsure of how much to divulge. Finally, she decided to be honest. She recounted the events objectively, focusing on the facts and avoiding any emotional embellishment. Belmont listened intently, his expression serious. "First, let me apologize," he said once she finished. "What you experienced is not reflective of the values we strive to uphold at Horizon Air. We value every passenger, and I'm deeply troubled by the treatment you received. This kind of behavior is unacceptable." Clara appreciated his candor, but remained cautious. "I understand that mistakes happen, but it's not the first time I've encountered such situations. It's a reminder that there's still much work to be done in fostering respect and equality." Belmont nodded. "You're absolutely right. And I want to assure you that we take this matter seriously. The crew involved will be held accountable, and we'll be conducting a thorough review of our training programs to ensure this doesn't happen again." Clara felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you, Mr. Belmont. I appreciate your willingness to address this." Their conversation continued, and by the end of it, Belmont had not only apologized but also offered Clara an opportunity to collaborate with Horizon Air on a new initiative focused on promoting diversity and inclusion within the airline industry. It was an unexpected turn of events, one that Clara saw as a chance to turn a negative experience into meaningful change. As the summit concluded, Clara reflected on the day's events. The morning's challenges had tested her resilience, but they had also opened doors she hadn't anticipated. She realized that even in moments of adversity, there was potential for growth and progress. The next day, as Clara boarded her return flight, she noticed a palpable shift in the crew's demeanor. They were attentive, courteous, and genuinely warm, a stark contrast to her earlier experience. She couldn't help but wonder if Belmont's influence had already begun to ripple through the organization. Seated by the window once again, Clara gazed at the clouds with a sense of peace. She had faced judgment and prejudice, but had emerged stronger, her voice resonating louder than ever. As the plane soared into the sky, Clara felt a renewed determination to continue her work, knowing that even the smallest acts of courage could spark change in the world. The return flight to Clara's home city was uneventful in the best way possible. The flight crew was attentive and kind, the passengers around her were pleasant, and she could finally settle into the rhythm of travel she had always enjoyed. Yet, her mind buzzed with the developments from the past day. The conversation with Richard Belmont had been unexpected, but it also felt like an opportunity for something larger than herself. Still, she couldn't shake the lingering unease of knowing how quickly prejudice and misunderstanding could escalate, even in spaces designed to connect people. Clara spent the flight drafting ideas on her laptop for the initiative Belmont had proposed. Her vision was ambitious yet simple, a program that would educate employees on implicit bias, create a safe space for dialogue, and implement structural changes to prevent discrimination. The more she wrote, the more determined she became to ensure her experience wasn't just another incident brushed aside with hollow apologies. She wanted to see real change. When she landed, Clara was greeted by the familiar sights of her home city. She stepped into the cool evening air and took a deep breath. It felt good to be back. Her ride home was quiet, giving her time to reflect on what lay ahead. She knew the road wouldn't be easy. Tackling systemic issues within a corporation was like steering a massive ship. It required persistence, precision, and patience. But Clara had spent her entire career navigating turbulent waters, and she was ready for the challenge. Over the next few weeks, Clara and Belmont exchanged emails and scheduled virtual meetings to refine their ideas. To her surprise, he was genuinely engaged and open to her suggestions. He introduced her to his senior leadership team, and together, they began laying the groundwork for the initiative, which they tentatively named Skies of Respect. The name reflected their shared belief that the skies should be a space of equality, connection, and respect for all travelers. Clara was soon invited to visit Horizon Air's headquarters to present her proposal to the broader team. The headquarters was an impressive building, sleek and modern, with large windows that overlooked a bustling airport. Belmont greeted her personally, his demeanor as warm and professional as ever. "Clara," he said with a smile, shaking her hand firmly. "Welcome. I hope the trip was smooth." "It was, thank you," Clara replied. "I'm excited to be here." Belmont led her through the building, introducing her to various team members. Clara noticed that the employees were a diverse group, but there was still an air of hierarchy and formality that seemed to hang in the space. She knew that fostering a culture of openness would be one of the initiative's biggest challenges. The meeting room where Clara was to present her proposal was already filled with key stakeholders, executives, HR leaders, and representatives from the flight operations team. Clara took a deep breath before stepping to the front of the room. She had spoken at countless events and summits, but there was something uniquely daunting about addressing a group of people who had the power to shape the very culture she sought to improve. Her presentation was thorough and impassioned. She outlined the importance of addressing implicit bias, shared research on the benefits of diversity and inclusion, and proposed actionable steps for Horizon Air to take. She emphasized the need for training programs, mentorship opportunities for underrepresented employees, and a feedback system that allowed passengers and employees to report incidents of discrimination without fear of retaliation. As Clara spoke, she could see nods of agreement from some in the room, but there were also skeptical expressions. One executive raised a hand to ask a pointed question. "Ms. Lawson," he began, his tone polite but guarded, "while I understand the importance of addressing these issues, how do you propose we balance these efforts with the operational demands of running an airline? Training programs and cultural shifts take time and resources." Clara met his gaze calmly. "I appreciate your concern, and I understand that time and resources are always a consideration. But I'd argue that the cost of inaction is far greater. Discrimination and bias not only harm individuals, but also damage the reputation and bottom line of a company. By investing in these initiatives now, you're not only creating a better environment for employees and passengers but also building a stronger, more resilient brand." The room was silent for a moment as her words sank in. Belmont, who had been listening attentively, spoke up. "I agree with Ms. Lawson. This isn't just about doing what's right, it's about positioning ourselves as leaders in an industry that's constantly evolving. If we want to remain competitive, we need to embrace change. Clara felt a surge of gratitude for Belmont's support. It was clear that he wasn't just paying lip service, he was committed to making this initiative a success. The rest of the meeting was productive, with team members brainstorming ways to implement the program and offering suggestions to refine Clara's proposal. By the time the meeting ended, Clara felt a renewed sense of hope. It was a small step, but it was progress. Over the next few months, Skies of Respect began to take shape. Clara worked closely with Horizon Air's team to develop training modules, create promotional materials, and organize focus groups. She traveled to various company hubs to conduct workshops and hear directly from employees about their experiences. The process was both exhausting and invigorating, and Clara often found herself reflecting on how far she had come since that fateful flight. The initiative wasn't without its challenges. Some employees resisted the changes, viewing them as unnecessary or burdensome. Clara encountered her share of pushback, but she remained steadfast, reminding herself of the bigger picture. She leaned on her experiences as a nonprofit leader, using empathy and data to bridge divides and foster understanding. One of the most rewarding moments came when Clara received an email from a flight attendant who had attended one of her workshops. The email was heartfelt, thanking Clara for her work and sharing how the training had opened her eyes to biases she hadn't realized she held. The flight attendant wrote about how she now approached her interactions with passengers and colleagues differently, with greater awareness and respect. Clara read the email several times, her heart swelling with pride. It was a reminder that even small shifts in perspective could have a profound impact. As Skies of Respect gained momentum, it began to attract attention outside the airline industry. Media outlets covered the initiative, praising Horizon Air for its proactive approach to addressing discrimination. Other companies reached out to Clara for advice, eager to replicate the program's success. Clara found herself juggling multiple roles, consultant, advocate, and leader, but she welcomed the challenge. One day, Clara received a call from Belmont. His voice was filled with excitement as he shared the news that Horizon Air had been selected to receive an industry award for its commitment to diversity and inclusion. The award ceremony was scheduled to take place in New York City, and Belmont insisted that Clara attend as the initiative's driving force. The ceremony was a grand affair, held in a luxurious ballroom filled with industry leaders and luminaries. Belmont took the stage to accept the award, but before giving his speech, he invited Clara to join him. "This award belongs to many people," Belmont said, addressing the audience. "But there's one person whose vision and determination have been instrumental in making Skies of Respect a reality. Clara Lawson, please join me." Clara stepped onto the stage to a standing ovation, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected this level of recognition, but as she stood beside Belmont, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. As Belmont handed her the microphone, Clara looked out at the audience and took a moment to gather her thoughts. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady. "This initiative started as a response to a single incident, but it has grown into something much larger, a testament to what's possible when we commit to creating a better, more inclusive world. There's still much work to be done, but tonight, we celebrate progress. Let's keep reaching for the skies." The applause that followed was thunderous, a fitting tribute to the woman who had turned adversity into an opportunity for change. Clara left the stage that night with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to continue her mission of building bridges, one flight at a time. Clara returned home from the award ceremony with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. The recognition had been unexpected and overwhelming, but it also validated the countless hours of work she had poured into the initiative. As she unpacked her suitcase, she thought about how far things had come since that fateful flight. What had started as an uncomfortable confrontation had blossomed into a transformative movement within the airline industry. Still, Clara knew the journey was far from over. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Clara balanced her consulting work with her ongoing responsibilities for Skies of Respect. The program had gained significant momentum, but with increased visibility came heightened scrutiny. Journalists began asking pointed questions about Horizon Air's past practices, and critics on social media debated whether the initiative was genuine or simply a public relations move. Clara found herself caught in the crossfire, as her name had become synonymous with the program. One particularly challenging day, Clara received an email from an investigative reporter. The message detailed allegations from former employees of Horizon Air who claimed they had faced systemic discrimination during their time with the company. The reporter wanted a statement from Clara, specifically about how Skies of Respect addressed these historical issues. Clara read the email twice, her stomach sinking. She had always known that tackling systemic problems meant confronting uncomfortable truths, but now the stakes felt higher than ever. She forwarded the email to Richard Belmont, adding a brief note, "We need to address this transparently. Let's discuss." Belmont's reply came within minutes, asking Clara to meet him and the senior leadership team on a video call later that day. The meeting was tense. Belmont opened by acknowledging the seriousness of the allegations, while the other executives shifted uneasily in their chairs. Clara listened carefully as they debated how to respond, noting that some leaned toward a defensive stance, while others suggested acknowledging the past and moving forward. When it was her turn to speak, Clara chose her words carefully. "Acknowledging past mistakes isn't a sign of weakness," she began. "It's a commitment to doing better. We can't claim to lead the industry in inclusivity if we're not willing to confront the skeletons in our own closet." The room fell silent. Belmont nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You're right," he said finally. "We need to be transparent and take responsibility. Clara, would you be willing to help us craft a statement?" Clara agreed, and over the next few days, she worked closely with Belmont and his team to draft a response. The final statement was honest and empathetic, acknowledging the airline's past failures and outlining the steps being taken to ensure a more equitable future. It also included an invitation for former employees to participate in listening sessions, where their experiences could help shape future policies. The response was met with mixed reactions. Some applauded Horizon Air's candor, while others remained skeptical. Clara tried not to dwell on the negativity, focusing instead on the progress being made. The listening sessions proved to be incredibly powerful, with former employees sharing stories that ranged from heartbreaking to hopeful. Clara facilitated many of these sessions herself, her background in advocacy and nonprofit work allowing her to create a safe and respectful environment for dialogue. One story, in particular, stayed with her. A former pilot named Marcus shared how he had been overlooked for promotions despite his exemplary record, only to discover later that less qualified colleagues had been advanced instead. Marcus spoke with a quiet dignity, his pain evident but his resolve unbroken. "I don't want an apology," he said. "I just want to know that no one else will have to go through what I did." After the session, Clara approached Marcus. "Your story is incredibly powerful," she said. "Would you be willing to share it more publicly? I think it could inspire real change." Marcus hesitated but eventually agreed, provided his identity was protected. Clara worked with him to craft an anonymized account that was shared during a company-wide training session. The story resonated deeply, prompting meaningful discussions among employees and leadership alike. As the months went on, the changes at Horizon Air became more visible. The airline introduced new hiring practices designed to promote diversity, revamped its employee training programs, and established an independent oversight committee to handle complaints of discrimination. Clara felt a deep sense of accomplishment, but she also knew there was still much to do. One day, Clara received an unexpected phone call from an organization she deeply respected, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO. The caller, a representative from UNESCO's Education and Equality Division, explained that they had been following her work with Skies of Respect and wanted to invite her to speak at their upcoming global conference in Geneva. "We believe your experience in transforming corporate culture could provide valuable insights for our efforts to promote inclusivity on a global scale," the representative said. Clara was stunned but honored. She accepted the invitation and immediately began preparing for the conference. This wasn't just an opportunity to showcase her work, it was a chance to influence change on a much larger scale. The weeks leading up to the conference were a blur of activity. Clara poured her energy into crafting a speech that would resonate with an international audience, drawing on her experiences with Horizon Air as well as her broader work in education and advocacy. She wanted to convey the universality of the lessons she had learned, that respect, empathy, and accountability were the foundation of any meaningful change. When Clara arrived in Geneva, she was struck by the diversity of the attendees. Delegates from every corner of the world had gathered to discuss issues ranging from gender equality to access to education. Clara felt a deep sense of responsibility as she took the stage, knowing that her words could inspire action far beyond the airline industry. Her speech was a powerful blend of storytelling and strategy. She recounted the pivotal moments of her journey, from the flight that had sparked the initiative to the challenges of implementing systemic change. She emphasized the importance of listening, learning, and leading with humility. "We often think of the sky as a boundary," Clara said, her voice steady. "But it's also a space of endless possibility. When we create environments where everyone feels valued and respected, we're not just changing a company or a community, we're changing the world." The audience erupted into applause, and Clara felt a surge of emotion. This moment was bigger than her, bigger than skies of respect. It was a reminder of the collective power of individuals working together for a common goal. After the conference, Clara was approached by several delegates who wanted to collaborate on initiatives in their own countries. She spent hours discussing ideas, sharing resources, and building connections. By the time she returned home, Clara knew her journey was far from over. Back at Horizon Air, the changes continued to take root. Employee surveys showed a marked improvement in morale and job satisfaction, and passenger feedback highlighted the noticeable shift in the airline's culture. Clara felt a deep sense of pride, but she also remained vigilant, knowing that sustaining progress required constant effort. One day, as Clara prepared for yet another meeting, she received an unexpected email from Belmont. The subject line read, "Thank you." Intrigued, Clara opened it to find a heartfelt message. "Clara," it began, "I've been reflecting on everything we've accomplished over the past year, and I wanted to take a moment to thank you. Your vision, determination, and unwavering commitment have not only transformed our company, but have also inspired me personally. I've learned so much from you, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to work alongside you. Here's to continuing this journey together." Clara smiled as she read the message, her heart full. The road had been long and often difficult, but moments like this reminded her why she had chosen to fight for change. She replied with a simple message, "Thank you, Richard. The journey continues." And it did. For Clara, the sky was no longer a refuge, it was a platform, a place where dreams and determination could soar together, reaching heights she had once only imagined. Clara's life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined since that pivotal flight. What had started as a single moment of humiliation and injustice had evolved into a global movement, one that now extended far beyond the airline industry. She had become a symbol of resilience, a voice for those who had long been unheard, and a bridge builder connecting people and institutions to the ideals of respect and inclusion. Yet, as fulfilling as her work was, it also came with immense pressure, and Clara often found herself wondering how she could sustain the momentum. The demands on her time grew exponentially. Invitations poured in from industries, governments, and nonprofit organizations eager to learn from her experiences with skies of respect. Clara had always been passionate about making a difference, but she hadn't anticipated the toll it would take on her personal life. Late nights, endless travel, and the constant weight of responsibility began to wear on her. For someone who had spent her career advocating for balance and equity, she realized she had neglected those values in her own life. One evening, Clara sat in her modest home office, surrounded by papers and glowing screens. She was reviewing a draft of an upcoming keynote address when her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. It was a photo of Clara as a child, beaming proudly as she held a toy airplane aloft. The accompanying text read, "You've always loved the skies. Don't forget to enjoy them too." The message hit Clara harder than she expected. She stared at the photo, her younger self's joy and wonder leaping off the screen. She realized that somewhere along the way, she had become so focused on fighting for others that she had forgotten to nurture her own dreams and happiness. She decided, then and there, that she needed to recalibrate, not to step away from her mission, but to ensure she could sustain it without losing herself in the process. The next day, Clara scheduled a meeting with Richard Belmont to discuss her future involvement with Horizon Air. Belmont greeted her warmly, as he always did, but he immediately sensed the seriousness in her demeanor. "Richard," Clara began, "I've been thinking about everything we've accomplished together, and I'm incredibly proud of the progress we've made. But I also need to be honest with myself, and with you. I need to step back, at least partially, from the day-to-day responsibilities of the initiative. I believe in skies of respect with all my heart, but I also need to create space for other parts of my life." Belmont leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I understand, Clara," he said after a moment. "You've given so much of yourself to this work, and it's only fair that you take time to focus on yourself. But if I may, I'd like to suggest something. What if we formalize your role as an advisor to the initiative? You wouldn't be involved in the daily operations, but your guidance would still be invaluable as we continue to grow." Clara considered the proposal. It felt like the perfect balance, remaining connected to the work she loved while allowing herself the freedom to explore new opportunities. "I'd like that," she said with a smile. "Thank you, Richard." With her role at Horizon Air redefined, Clara took her first steps toward a more balanced life. She began saying no to engagements that didn't align with her values or priorities, and focused on the projects that truly inspired her. She also reconnected with friends and family, rebuilding relationships that had taken a back seat to her career. Slowly but surely, she began to rediscover the joy and wonder she had felt as that little girl with the toy airplane. Despite stepping back, Clara's influence continued to ripple outward. Skies of Respect had become a blueprint for change, and other industries began adopting similar initiatives. Clara worked with tech companies to address bias in algorithms, partnered with schools to promote diversity in STEM fields, and even collaborated with a global sports organization to create more inclusive environments for athletes. One of the most fulfilling projects came from an unexpected source, a small regional airline in Africa that reached out to Clara for help. The airline CEO, a young woman named Ayanda, explained that she had been inspired by Clara's work and wanted to implement a similar program in her own company. Ayanda's story resonated deeply with Clara, as it reminded her of her own journey, facing skepticism, breaking barriers, and striving to create a more equitable future. Clara flew to Ayanda's headquarters in Nairobi, where she spent 2 weeks working closely with the airline's team. The experience was both humbling and invigorating. The challenges Ayanda faced were unique, rooted in cultural and logistical complexities that Clara had never encountered before. But the passion and determination of Ayanda and her team were infectious, and Clara left Kenya feeling more inspired than she had in years. As Clara's work expanded globally, she began to see the interconnectedness of the issues she had been tackling. Bias and discrimination weren't confined to any one industry or region, they were systemic problems that required systemic solutions. Clara started to dream bigger, envisioning a global coalition of leaders, organizations, and activists working together to create lasting change. Her vision took shape in the form of a nonprofit organization she founded, called the Elevation Project. The mission was simple yet ambitious, to elevate conversations about equity, inclusion, and respect across all sectors and societies. The Elevation Project became a hub for research, advocacy, and collaboration, bringing together voices from every corner of the globe. The launch of the organization was met with widespread support, and Clara found herself once again at the forefront of a movement. But this time, she approached it differently. She built a strong team of leaders who shared her passion and values, ensuring that the work didn't rest solely on her shoulders. She also prioritized her own well-being, taking time to travel, write, and reconnect with her love of the skies. One crisp autumn morning, Clara found herself on a flight to a remote destination she had always dreamed of visiting, the Faroe Islands. Seated by the window, she gazed out at the endless expanse of clouds, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. The hum of the engines was a familiar comfort, a reminder of how far she had come. As the plane began its descent, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. It wasn't just a journey of miles or accomplishments, it was a journey of growth, resilience, and self-discovery. She thought about the people she had met, the lives she had touched, and the changes she had helped to create. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to simply be. The plane touched down gently, and Clara stepped into the cool, salty air of the Faroe Islands. She had no meetings, no speeches, and no obligations, just a few days to explore, reflect, and dream. As she walked toward the terminal, she glanced back at the aircraft, its silhouette framed by the rising sun. It was a symbol of connection, possibility, and hope, just like the work she had dedicated her life to. And as Clara ventured into the rugged beauty of the islands, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. For the skies that had carried her, the challenges that had shaped her, and the boundless horizons that lay ahead. This was not the end of her story but the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with endless possibilities, where the sky was never the limit but always the starting point.